Hello, everybody, and thanks for tuning in to another Facebook Live. Today, I am joined with Alana Jones
Hello.
from the Central Coast.
That's right.
Yep.
Yeah. Hi. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thanks, Alana. So, obviously, Central Coast is in New South Wales for everybody listening. So it's great having Alana on tonight. Alana is a wealth of experience. She has done everything from renovating and, to whole renovating, flipping. She's done, she's a developer, does, knockdown rebuilds, even short-term rentals, granny flats. So fair experience. She's also coached a lot of people as well. So she is, a wealth of experience, obviously helped other people with their projects and that sort of stuff through coaching. So I think tonight's chat is certainly going to be very useful for a lot of people listening. So thanks for jumping on, Alana. Just wanted to start with your fun fact, and that was you bought your first property as an 18-year-old working at McDonald's.
Yeah. I've struggled to work out what my fun fact was going to be, and everything's property related with me, and that was one of the little cool things that I came up with. So that was a few years before we kind of got into the more professional space of the education and the courses and the seminar and renovating, professionally and stuff. But yeah, that was my first little property.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Whereabouts was that property? Whereabouts did you buy that?
It was in Bligh Park, so Western New South Wales. Yeah, Western Sydney essentially. And getting creatively as a young 18-year-old, I ended up with a couple of friends living in there, so we split the rent 3 ways. So that helped go towards the mortgage to get out of home at quite a young age, and yeah.
Awesome. Have you still got that property, or when did you sell that?
We sold that about 4 years ago, maybe 5 years ago.
You had it for a little while.
Yeah, we held it for quite some time. It did good. It was a good platform to leverage off. When we kind of went pro. A few things that you might have done differently with the education, but I think we did the best we could at the time. And yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So obviously, to buy your first property at 18, that's early, right? So did you have, parents and family telling you needed to buy a property, or where did that love for property, or that, was it more of a, I've been told to do this, so it's the right thing to do? Like, how did the idea come about?
A little bit of, I guess, parents' encouragement, intuition, that intention that property is the space for that, long-term wealth vehicle. And so I was always very driven to kind of get something to get my foot in. Obviously, prices are very different to what they are now, but so was income in a lot of ways, and it's all relative. But yeah, I think I just always wanted more for the future, and even I knew back then I didn't want to be working for someone else for the rest of my life. But didn't know how quick the journey could be or how slow the journey could be, but just knew that you had to get a foot on something, wanted to get out of home, and so the journey begins.
Awesome. Okay, awesome. Do you think somebody starting out as an 18-year-old, working in Macca's, could they get into a property in that same situation now, or is property too expensive? You probably couldn't do it in Sydney, but obviously,
I was going to say it's location based, right? Like if you can, but you're not going to get maybe that PPR kind of off the bat. And even that PPR that I went into, I didn't go into it just a traditional PPR, living on it myself, responsible for the full mortgage at that state. I think rent vesting is a very viable option for young people, but you want to get your foot on something and use what you can. Like, so while you're at home, put the income to good use. We see so many people that have really high income and nothing to show for it 10 years later. And it's crazy how fast circumstances can change, but your means will live to your income in a lot of respects, and your lifestyle and what you do. And a lot of people don't want to actually take that sacrifice and, early on to build that.
Yeah, awesome. 100%. Couldn't agree more. Rent vesting, it's a good point. I mean, a lot of people obviously know what rent vesting is, but for those who might be a little bit younger and listening and wondering what you're talking about, can you just explain exactly what rent vesting is?
Yeah, and I guess I'll premise that with it's not something that we're doing at the moment because of where we're at. But for someone that wants to get their foot on a property market, but you don't want to live where you can afford, buy something you can afford that has a better yield, better prospects than perhaps where you want to live, where you want to work. If you're working in the inner city, the yield on the property is really, really low. You can rent it for a fraction of what holding a mortgage on that property would actually cost you. So why not rent that and invest in a different location that has perhaps better growth prospects, but you can afford it, but it's got a better yield to actually support holding that property. So if you can buy something for 500,000 that's going to rent for 500,000 that maybe has potential to do other stuff within the future, but that's not in a location you want to live in, then rent where you're at, where it might be $1 million apartment or $1 million house that's only going to cost you $700 a week, which is a fraction of what the mortgage on that property would be. So it can be a very good financial strategy when used properly. Because yeah, if you can rent something for cheaper than you're going to buy, well, why buy it? Yes, for growth prospects, but if you're starting out and you can't afford that kind of negative cash flow on it, move to a location that might have better prospects for your situation.
For sure. Awesome. Obviously a lot of young investors are using that strategy now. A lot of, buyers agents spruiking it and, property analysts and all the rest of it. So it's, 100%.
Yeah, they can't afford there. They want to live there. So it's just developed into
and even some people, for example, like where they're living at the moment might not have good growth prospects. So, why buy somewhere where you're currently living where, it's a flat market when you could potentially be buying into a market where there's going to be strong growth, right away sort of thing.
That's right. I mean, most of the time that decision is driven by affordability as opposed to, the growth because people have a sense of security of that roof over their head that they control. But yeah, you've got to sometimes look at the other options. Well, is that the only thing you can do and it taps you out of anything else? Is that the best move? It's property's a bit of a chess game. You've got to plan the next move and the next piece and have a bit of that game plan.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so let's talk a bit more about you then and your journey. Like I said, it's pretty extensive. You've done a lot of deals, but you've also, what you've done differently to a lot of other people is you've really sort of diversified and you haven't just had one strategy. You've gone, okay, well, I'm going to do this for cash flow. I'm going to do this for, bigger chunks of, money. I'm going to do this for, but before you got to that, before you did your first renovation, your development, knockdown, rebuild, and all that sort of stuff, before you obviously, grew in that sense, how did it start from, okay, I bought my first investment property as an 18-year-old, how did that grow until, okay, well, I actually see that this property is a vehicle. How did that go? And then how did you transition from that as to, full-time sort of property professional?
Professionally, and I think the reason we've done a lot of strategies is because we will grow as we grow, both on educational skill, financially, you want to expand, and sometimes that strategy that you were doing isn't gonna, you don't want to do it forever. There's a lot to be said for rinse and repeat, to find your niche, to hone down and do it, just like you're doing in the Perth market, right? You found a strategy that works. The reality is that when that strategy doesn't work, you want to move on, and that maybe your starter strategy isn't going to be what you're going to do forever. So we've gone through a lot of the different strategies. Our first was a renovation and granny flat. So we bought a property. It was $405,000 at the time. We did a $15,000 reno on it, which was a lot of hard work, right? We're on the paintbrush ourselves. We're doing as much as we can back in those days, right? This is about 9 years ago now. So I was about 24 at the time. So yeah, 6 years after kind of that first thing, and kind of come into this world of, hey, it could be so much more than just a buy and pay it off over 30 years and, a retirement then. So we got into it with that deal. So we renovated it, hard slog. We increased the equity enough to actually cover the deposit for the granny flat build. Yeah, cool. So when we went and got the granny flat on that property, we didn't have to chip in any more cash for the granny flat because of the equity that already had been uplifted in the reno. So that was really cool. So effectively we were in for deposits, the 20% deposit on the house, the stamps, 15 grand reno. And then when we went to do the granny flat, and I think that was about 120 grand, it was fully then financed. So, you know, we didn't necessarily go and re-leverage the house at all, but we just got that loan for the granny flat, and so got that. So from a strategy perspective, we are in for about 550,000, I want to say, roughly, based on all those costs, the granny flat, the reno, and everything. We've now got an asset that was worth 700,000 at the time, because the reno took the value up to 550 before the granny flat, and then we did the granny flat not adding too much more than cost, because the granny flat is a cash flow strategy, not a chunk strategy. But that we've now got an asset that was $700 a week, but it's cost us 550. And with the dual rental, it was very strong to hold, and that's just gone up over time, right? So that property we do still hold. It's probably worth around about the $1 million mark, and it has rent of, I want to say, about 850 combined between the house and the granny flat. So would I go and buy a house and granny flat for $1 million that's got $850 rent a week? Probably not. But you create it yourself in the right area, and when you're in for cost base, it can support you long term. So yeah, that was our first kind of property deal, with a bit more of that mindset of, you know, we want to kind of get somewhere a bit faster.
Yeah, cool. So whereabouts was that deal? Was that Sydney or Central Coast?
It was the Penrith area. Yeah, we came up to the Central Coast about 4 years ago. So a lot of our early stuff was all around. It was where we can afford. The so that was close to us, right? It wasn't too far. From there, we went down to more regional into Nowra, down the South Coast, and we kind of replicated that strategy, and we brought that for 228,000, and again did a reno of the house and a granny flat, and sat on the dual rent, right? So we were kind of, you know, working our butts off. It's got a bit of debt with it. It's got positive cash flow. It's got the two rents and that, and that was kind of where we started.
Yeah, nice. Okay, so basically, how many of those deals have you done where you bought it, did a bit of a reno to add value, and then the granny flat? How many of those deals have you done?
So we did those two, and then we kind of went, all right, we want to work out a bit more active how to pay this debt down, and what do we do? And then so the next thing we started to do was to look at the reno flipping, and so we did do one of those. I don't remember the timeline off the top of my head now or where it was, but we did a reno flip then. So we're like, okay, we need to sell, like we want to sell something, bank some chunk cash. So we did that. We're obviously still very driven on building a portfolio, and so we actually then we're chasing yields. So we then looked for a regional property that we're looking for the highest yield we could get, right? Because that was where we were at the time. But hey, it worked for us. We ended up buying in Broken Hill of all places, but it was dirt cheap. And, you know, it hasn't gone up in huge value, but the yield at the time was like 18%, and it's only gone up from there. So it's got, you know, next to nothing on it. And that tenant has, you know, never let us down a day. In the rental has been every week. We've not had a single vacancy on it. I think when we bought it, we paid $46,000 for a house.
46 grand.
Yeah, and it was rented at 120, I want to say, at the time. And I think it's about 160 now. So I mean, it's not huge, but if you look at the cost base and that rental yield, it was quite a strong yield. But yeah, you can only do that was kind of the next one.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So started out with a couple of buy, renovate, and then add the granny flat to hold. And then how many flips have you done? It hasn't been a massive strategy of yours, has it? Or
the reno flips? Yeah. So we've done about 6 overall in terms of our portfolio, I think it was. Yeah. So done a couple in the early days, and then and it's all about when it works, right? And so we'll still renovate. We've done the renos to hold as well, because you don't want to leave money on the table. But yeah, it's renos to flips. You've got to really find the margin as well. But there's certainly a good business. But at this time, we were trying to build up a bit of a portfolio and the cash flow base. So the
so
next one we
your
got
deals, sorry, I was going to say
That's
your
okay.
deals, whether it's the reno to flip or the buy hold, granny flat. Like, how are you finding your deals?
Agent relationship
on market off. Yeah, okay. So
a bit of both, right? We do letterbox drops still. We do send letters when we're actively hunting and we've got a criteria. But generally looking on market and then building into the agent relationships. So a lot come from the agent relationships. Some of it's off market, some of it's just getting the background and stuff. But it's working out what you want and being clear on it. So this is what the deal looks like, and then actually talking to the agents all the time of this is what I'm looking for, this is what I'm looking for. And so they think of you when it comes across. And we've also had agents send us other properties that have come online from other agents just because they're thinking of us. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, awesome. So where how did it expand then? So you've done those two strategies. At this point, are you working, or at this point are you still?
We're still working then. Yeah, that was early on. I was working in the disability services at the time. So started as a support worker and worked my way up into a management position, managing the group homes. So that was what I did there. So the next strategy we then did was a duplex. It ended up being a block of land, and most of the market was looking at it just for a single house. They didn't think that you could actually get a duplex on it or get two, but we could, and it was a corner. And so these houses look and feel completely separate. There's not even a joint wall. They've got 900-meter boundaries on either side of like the middle fence, right? They are completely kind of separate, and it's not dissimilar to something that you're seeing in the new estates on a small block. So it doesn't feel duplexy. So that was their next taste into development.
Yeah. Okay. So to go into the development, when you're talking about a duplex, so it's a corner block. What was it like? A sort of 700 square meter block, and you just
about that 7 something.
Okay, so you got basically being a corner, 2 street frontages, essentially. Yep. Yeah,
you had them. We ended up facing both of them on the same street. Just practically, it worked with the block dimensions. But there is always that option on a corner to have them on separate streets.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Okay, and so duplexes are not easy to make work numbers wise. So how? Definitely very hard to make it work in Perth, that's for sure.
Yeah.
How, what was it? Was it the time in the market at the time where it was a strategy that was working, or how did that come about, that deal, and obviously the numbers back up?
So what worked with that strategy was we were looking at knockdown rebuilds, right? So like as in knockdown and doing a duplex on it, or we were looking at a block where you were retaining the house and putting something on the back. And the numbers were really tough to make that work, right? Because there was a huge intrinsic value on the actual house, no matter what you wanted to do with it, no matter how bad it was, right? So there was a huge intrinsic value there. This one came online, and because it was a vacant block of land, it was cheaper. And the agent had kind of priced it as a single house kind of block. So they were just looking at putting a single house and going, okay, well, your single house is going to be this, working backwards. And so when it was priced like that, the numbers did work. Also, building costs were a fair bit cheaper back then. Not saying duplexes still work. We're doing them today in a different market. So it's about, working out the area that the strategy works in. So that was a lower price point that we were playing at, and a lot of the time I don't advocate for trying to do them in lower priced areas because your construction cost doesn't change, but your resale is just not there, right? So we now, our current strategy is generally targeting quite high-end places, quite luxury and prime development spots. So, you know, we're on the coast, so we kind of hug the coastal strip a bit. Because even, you know, 2 kilometers away, the numbers are not the same as they are when you're walk to the beach, right? So
yeah, that's an interesting point that you make there, and I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's a lot of people buying, you know, even in Perth, for example, a lot of interstate investors buying in your sort of lower socioeconomic areas for cash flow, and they're buying, it's got duplex potential. And I'm like, the numbers just don't stack up for duplexes, and they're not going to for a long time. But you made a good point then as to why. And the reason is your construction price is exactly the same. So whether you can sell the property, you know, let's say it's a single level dwelling, you know, whether you can sell it for, you know, $1 million or 1.2 at the other end, or if you can sell it for 500,000, you know, typically, I mean, unless the specifications a little bit different,
I was going to say,
the build price is going to be relatively the same. So so that's, you know, so basically if your end sale when you finish building them, if it's not, you know, if it's low end, then it's going to be hard to make those duplexes work, isn't it?
Absolutely. And look, when you are building something smaller, your cost is cheaper, and you can build them cheaper by having a low spec and a physically smaller dwelling. But like for like in terms of the product, it's going to cost the same to build here versus there. So, short of having a really small property that you're constructing, that's the only thing that brings it down. And obviously, you do control a bit in terms of your spec level, but you've got to match that to what your buyers want, because if you don't build the product and demand a price tag, they're not going to do it. But at the same tune, you also need to know what they're not going to pay for, that you're going to waste money at, right? A lot of places will have a ceiling. So we were talking to our builder just the other day, looking through one of his ones, and he's commented that the developer was very smart and they took a lot of advice from, you know, the agents of your cap resale is this amount. This is the things that you need to get the sale and that price. Anything else, just don't bother, because you're not going to get any more bang for your buck. But this is their expectation of this product in this location, for this dollar. And so you've really got to work with the agents and understand that.
Yeah, 100%. Cool. So would you say your journey so far over the 9 years of, you know, doing property deals, have you sort of started more at the lower end and you've sort of gradually, you know, done, I suppose, bigger and more expensive type deals as you've sort of, you know, grown?
Absolutely. Yeah. And part of it's, the market going up, but it is also your comfort level and, you know, the strategies. Because if we went to do the same deals that we did starting out today, it's different figures than they were when we did them. But you've got to match your strategy with the area that either you can access or the numbers work or whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah. So most of all the reno flips that you've done, have they all been sort of more lower end suburbs? Have you done any sort of more, you know, higher end suburbs for the reno flips? Have you done any bigger sort of structural renos or anything like that?
We haven't done structural because we either do cosmetic or we knock down rebuild. So we're either doing a cosmetic reno that we can, you know, quickly tart up and flesh out. And the biggest one of those we've done was a 1.2 purchase price that we sold for 1.6. So, you know, that worked really well.
So what was that? Sorry, just elaborate.
That was a reno. Yeah, that was a reno. That was probably one. I think that was one of the first renos we did up the coast. So 4-bedroom brick home, the ideal like 20-year-old kind of dated cosmetically property, but structurally sound. So
that was obviously quite a nice. I mean, was that a couple of years back? Was it?
That was about 2.5 years ago, maybe.
So for 1.6, 2.5 years ago, that would have been a sort of a nicer suburb in the Central Coast.
Yep, and it's kind of walkable to the beach. It is a very gentrifying area, right? So a lot of it has to do with where people wanting to go, where they're looking for. But it was a big house too.
Yeah.
So
yeah, cool. All right, and so with something like that, you know, you're buying it. So you bought it at 1.2, sold it at 1.6. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, roughly. I think the exact numbers was 1, 2, 20. The resale was 1,660 maybe, roughly.
Yeah, cool. So something like that, like reno costs, how much would that have cost you? Like obviously, you know, the more expensive the property is,
I believe that was about a 90 grand reno.
Okay, so that's not too bad. 90 grand's pretty cheap.
Yeah, it was, as I said, like structurally fine, and all in good nick. So it was very cosmetic stuff.
Yeah,
you know, we've done a reno recently that cost 120 grand in much smaller house and stuff because there was a bit more structural work to it.
Yeah, okay, awesome. And the one that you've just done recently, same sort of area on the coast?
Different suburb. Yeah.
Different suburb. Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Just talk to me about something I'm interested in hearing. You haven't done the structural renovations. You're more of a sort of the knockdown rebuild.
Yeah.
What's the reason for that? I mean, structural renos, I mean, in my opinion, are only really good for like your more character homes because people, you know, see value in character homes. Whereas, you know, if it's not, so is that why? Is it maybe the area that you're in? It's not.
I think it's the area that we're in. It's a very old area, so there's a lot of those really rundown shacks. And we have seen some of those that have basically been taken back to slab and some base frame, and then people do a huge reno on them. For us, in the resale that's there, it's a lot easier to wipe a clean slate to the builder. So it's a lot more hands off. It's easier.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, fair enough. Time frame for something like that then for your so for you, for example, if you're doing a small cosmetic reno, how long does that sort of project take you versus how long does a knockdown rebuild? Like time frames for the two sorts of projects, what do they sort of typically take you?
Yeah, cosmetic reno, you're targeting 6 months. So that's your generally, like say, contract. Your contract to sale, you've got your settlement period, you've got your reno time, then you got your sales time and your settlement window on the other end. We have actually done a really cool strategy before in the reno where we had a 3-month settlement but immediate access. So we were basically we released the deposit to the vendor and in exchange for keys. So we were pretty much on the market a week after settlement for the resale on the other end. So that's kind of cool. It's minimal. Yeah. So you can certainly get, a private lender at that full thing, which at a price point for 6 months, you kind of, it can add up quickly. But when you're really just waiting for the sales time, it works well.
Yeah, awesome. And what about your knockdown rebuilds? How long are they taking? So from start to finish. So
probably the 18 months plus, just from a lead-in time, going through the planning process, picking your design, picking your elements, getting your builder organized, then your demo. Then there's about a 6-month actual build window, and then you've got to do your finishes off at the end. So your driveways and your landscaping, and then get it on the market and then sell it and the settlement on the other side. So I would say be realistically 18 months. You used to kind of want to go in pretty gung-ho and say, if I can get a 3-month settlement, I should be back on the market in 12 months. But you got to be realistic in time frames, and that planning stage. I think people can underestimate it and just how quick people move. But sometimes in that luxury market as well, in your area, you've got to be conscious of your sales time. So sometimes it's not going to, that product, when you're wanting a top dollar for a top product, doesn't necessarily sell first open. So you need to kind of be prepared for that.
Yeah. Okay. So what are you saying? It could take 40 or 60 days or longer to sell it?
Yeah, it could take longer. Could be ideal that time. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. You mentioned 6 months for construction. For that sounds awfully quick compared to what's happening in Perth with construction. I mean, even at the moment over here for a single story dwelling, we're looking at 12 months construction time.
Really? No, 6 months. I'm saying, like, once the builders get on site and they start the slab, it's pretty much going to be about 6 months, but before you then get your keys on the other side, bar the landscaping stuff.
So here in Perth at the moment. in Perth, 12 months from
really slow.
really. It used to be
I say
6
we've got
months.
delays on other parts of the process, not
Yeah.
the actual construction. But again, that's your team and who you're working with, right? We were having a conversation earlier about project builders versus custom builders. And,
yeah.
yeah.
I think also maybe our construction method with the double brick and stuff like that, and there's a massive shortage of bricklayers and stuff like that. You know, like slabs can get done, and then the bricks can be on the slab.
Yeah.
And then it could be a couple of months before the bricklayer even starts because there's a shortage of them. So I suppose every market's different, but
absolutely.
WA, Perth still has this double brick construction mentality, which it's taking a long time to change, but I'm sure it will
to get it up.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
All right, awesome. So it's good. It's good having this conversation with you because most people I get on here, it's all about renovating and flipping only, and but it's good having a chat with someone who's doing other strategies. So
we've certainly done our time renovating. We've done a lot, and they still work. I think right now we'd only really be looking to do renovations in like joint venture arrangements, like with sellers, for example, not necessarily like with money partners and stuff, because the margin's really quite tight. So it's we're open to a reno in something like that, but otherwise we're kind of focusing on other strategies at the moment.
Yeah, awesome. Let's talk about that then. So I suppose what you're talking, not everyone listening is going to know what a seller JV is, or so I suppose what you're saying, because it's you're buying that sort of $1 million plus mark, there's a fair bit of stamp duty. So
fair bit of stamp duty, fair bit of time.
Yeah. So on that, then, do you want to obviously just talk us through? And I know obviously I speak a lot about it in my course, and do a lot of content on JVs and stuff like that. But talk to us about the sort of JV agreement that you'd be looking for ideally in a perfect world.
Oh, look, there's so many different ways. Like you could have a start value with an owner. And then you do the renovation, and then you split the profits above that cost. You could just take a percentage of the resale when you sell it, because you go into a reno expecting 10% profit, buy and hold and stuff. So if you were to have security of a set percentage, you don't necessarily need 10%, and that's obviously attractive to them. So that would be someone that is wanting to go to market, that the house needs work. So we can come in and we can do the reno, and then we put it on the market, and we just take a set percentage at the end. They've got and they keep everything above it. So I think that's quite clean, and will probably be my preferred, because there's no argy-bargy about what it's worth now. There's okay, well, maybe you're going to go and get this for it now. There's no uncertainty about what you're going to get. Yes, it will change slightly, but you're making the percentage you expect going into it, and then they just keep everything above it. So if they get a record price, they're happy. You still made the money you're expecting for only putting in the reno. If it doesn't get the price they want, well, you're not losing, because you're still taking the same kind of clip. So that's probably the ideal.
Yeah. Okay. So just to clarify, so basically ideal. You like, let's say, for example, how are you finding these people? These people are more from letterbox shops, right? These are not on market properties.
No, they're kind of on the letterboxing, or it is kind of connecting with the agents and saying, if they're coming to market but they don't need to sell and they want to maximize their price, put us in touch before. So that's a good avenue. Sometimes it is just conversation in networking groups. Like, we're in conversation at the moment with some people about potentially doing that. They've gotten about 3/4 of the way through a huge structural reno, and have run out of cash, and can't see the end of the light. They hate the house. Now this is their kind of dream home that they want to do. And so that's a scenario if they're ready to sell and commit, because they don't want to live in the reno site and they can't afford to kind of do it. So there's some properties with some big disparity. So I think it's more relationships. You can certainly try and get them the letter, but I think it'll be an interesting option. But I think if you can leverage relationships with the likes of agents to actually say, hey, this is essentially a service I can offer, and everyone's kind of going to win. But yeah.
How does the agent win? I mean, I'm sure
They're still going to get the sale, and they get a better sellable product rather than selling rubbish and it sells at a higher price point. That's probably the win there.
Yeah.
And it might be okay, well, they're not committed to selling the product as is. They really want to maximize it. They're not concerned. So they get to take a better product to market in the future. That's probably the win there that I see. Because if the vendor wants to sell it now, then they will just take it to market.
Yeah, okay. And so essentially they're going to make more commission from, selling a better product once you're finished with it versus trying to sell it, half done sort of thing when it's not.
Yeah, exactly, right. And it comes down to the vendor's motivations, because to the agent, a commission's a commission. But if they're not committed to the sale, if they're unrealistic in their sales price and they want top dollar, it's a way to achieve that. So they're not, and it's probably appropriate for if they're not going to sell it right now anyway, they're kind of talking about doing some work, getting some things. Then it's a potential avenue, because if they've committed, then they're going to do it. But you approach it with the buyers in a similar way. You're like, okay, look, if I'm buying this as, if a property's not selling, it can work too. Like say, okay, I'm going to be factoring in 10% profit margin. Market's a bit sketchy. I've got to be very cautious of my resale, so I'm estimating it here. Here's my profit. Here's my cost. Here's my stamps. My offer's X. However, if we came in and did the reno and just took, less than X on the end, you're keeping all those costs in your pocket.
Yeah, for sure. Just on the seller JV thing, like a lot of people say, oh, it's so hard to get, these deals over the line, I mean, I always tell everyone, it needs to be a win-win, because there has to be something in it for them to choose, to do a JV. To do a seller JV with you. Obviously, they've got to trust you. So you've got to
absolutely.
And if the agents are introducing you and you've got a relationship with the agent, having that third party is obviously going to help as well. But
absolutely.
And I'm surprised that you actually get seller JVs through agents, because I had got one through an agent, but a lot of the time the agents are just.
It can be tough, and sometimes it's a different kind of tack of it. And if it's not selling, you go, okay, well, let's contract on it. But we're not doing a normal settlement, and you get some terms, right? And then it's selling a property that is not actually selling. But it's interesting you say that, because I was talking to some friends the other week, and they've got a property that needs work and stuff, and the agent actually gave them contact and said, well, this is your value now, this is your potential renovated value. These guys will come in and do the reno and take a flip of the profit and fund it for you. And they weren't talking about us, right? But they were talking about other companies that do that.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, okay.
So it's interesting, like perception sometimes that we have of why would someone do that or not do it?
Exactly, and essentially you self-sabotage yourself, because you're already making up the you're already
the story in your head. Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. So let's talk about that win-win thing. So if you meet somebody or whatever, like talk to us about some things that you could like, how can you make it a win for them, for the seller? What things?
So you've got to work out what they want, right? What are their needs? Are they just dollar focused? Is there something else in it? Do they need to get out quickly, and get somewhere else? Like, you won't identify what their wins are until you know what they actually want and need. But obviously the win-win that you're expecting is that you're going to get more money, right? That's your win, and that's a huge win. Hey, if I was to buy this from you as a project, and I always caveat with, hey, I'm happy to go buy this to you. I'm going to pay, say, $500,000, whatever the property is worth to me as an unrenovated project. And I'll always caveat it with that. Hey, this is what I would be offering on the property. However, if we did this and you delayed your sale for 6 months, then you could potentially walk away with this.
Yeah, okay. So basically, and the reason why you can offer more money is because, hey, I don't have to pay stamp duty because I'm not buying this property. I'm not settling it.
All of those costs that add up, apart from the actual hard reno costs, even your interest and stuff, effectively, I was going to say sales commission, but you're still paid on the end, right? But in terms of the transaction, the seller's walking away with no commission because it just comes out of the one resale. It hasn't transacted twice. So there effectively is a commission saving if you've got them direct, right? So you're getting all those back. And also in a lot of those cases, you can take a smaller percentage of the profit because you've got certainty of it. So where, you're not going into a reno for less than 10% profit and expecting all your costs, maybe you do a seller joint venture and you're happy with 7%. So, I think what's the numbers on a cosmetic reno? You need to make a sale 33% higher than what you paid for it, like to make you a 10% profit. That's a huge margin, right? But if you're just taking 7% and the actual hard cost, well, they're 20% ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, cool. Okay, and so just for some people listening, I mean, as far as security on that, like, you know, what sort of security are you putting in place for both yourself and the JV partner?
So there'd be like a joint venture agreement written up and something on title. Normally it'd be like a caveat depending on, you know, what the title situation is, but you'd want something on title to just secure your position at the settlement table. The better security you can get, the better. Like if you could get a second mortgage, it kind of gives you more rights if they, you know, have any issues when it comes to the selling in terms of a disagreement of price or not selling or whatever. But at minimum, you'd want, a caveat kind of sitting on the title.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. All right. Awesome. Okay.
That's the biggest risk in something like that, right? That they turn around and say, oh, I don't want to sell now. I've got this beautiful property that is fully renovated and stuff. Well, I don't want to sell now. So you need to have some powers in your like joint venture agreement and documentation that can effectively force a sale if they kind of change it. But yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously there's always that risk. I mean, you obviously, you know, you put in the right security in place and all that thing to obviously minimize that, and it shouldn't happen. But I suppose anything in the law, you know, nothing is you know, completely watertight, is it? So
there's a risk in everything we do, especially with property. It's about mitigating them and knowing what they are and being aware.
Yeah, 100%. Awesome. All right, so let's talk about, so, you know, we've obviously where we've got to in your journey so far, and then how did you sort of, you know, where are you now as far as like the projects that you've been doing most recently? Talk us about, you know, what you're. I mean, I think you've mentioned you've done short-term rentals. Do you want to sort of touch on that as well? And just basically what you're doing. What you're doing at the moment.
So we've just sold the knockdown rebuild at the end of last year, which performed really well, and we've got another one on the market at the moment. So they're kind of our current ones. We've got 3 Airbnbs. One of them was part of a duplex that we sold one side of it, and at the moment we've kept the other side. We've got an Airbnb. The other 2 were very intentionally brought for Airbnb. So it's kind of about working out what strategy you need at the moment and what do you need next for your portfolio and position. One of the Airbnbs is a dual occupancy. So it was brought as a unrenovated dual occupancy approved top and lower level unit. That was done a huge renovation on it, made it really modern and pretty and clean. And then both of them on Airbnb. So groups can get the entire house or they can get either unit individually. And that's on a beautiful creek setting, and it's about a 200-meter walk around the corner from the actual beach and sand. So that does really well. And that was, brought and done intentionally for that. So that was a reno dual lock hold for Airbnb, like a lot more income than you would just on a standard rental. And then the other one we did was really good buying. So we bought this one at auction for $975 when basically knockdowns in the street were going for $900. Or not $900 to $930. I think there was one that had sold for $930-ish that it was falling apart. So this one had effectively like freshly tiled bathrooms. It's an old cottage, but it was clean. The bathrooms were done and tiled. The kitchen was fine. It was clean. It was, it was okay. It was not like a huge modern thing, but you don't need that. It was freshly painted because the seller's son was a painter, so they'd done a fresh coat of paint. So we had to do nothing to that on purchase. And when you look at the value of that as a product compared to 50 grand less for something that has to be knocked down and is uninhabitable, there was huge value there. And this has got a little room at the back. So that was ready to go on Airbnb straight away. So we also negotiated in that conditions that we could style the property and get it listed on Airbnb prior to settlement. So effectively we settled on maybe a Tuesday or something, and we had our first guests that weekend. So that was very streamlined. it's a fairly small block. That one, it's about 420 square meters, but it's got a laneway, and we've just actually had approved a granny flat on that property that comes off the rear lane. So we'll be looking to commence that in the near future. We'll be removing a little bit of the house, like that extra little bedroom will be going, but there'll be a whole new like 2-bedroom granny flat there. So effectively, the yield on that would then double what's already kind of a good, and it probably won't double because obviously the 2-bedroom will be a bit smaller and the house will probably take a hit, but it'll be, you know, a lot more than what it is. So, you know, we're always buying something that we see as very great value in comparison to other stuff and that has improvement potential.
Yeah, awesome. How's your experience been doing the Airbnb stuff? Have you had any sort of horror stories, any nightmares or anything like that?
Oh, not huge horror stories. Like there's always some things that don't always go to plan. I was talking to someone the other day about Airbnbs, and I was actually doing a little talk to a small group of people about it, and I ended up, I'm like, oh no, not much. Like, oh, there's probably only been 1 or 2 instances, and I think I came up with like, oh, this happened, and then this one happened, and this happened, and I ended up, I think there was about 5, but they're not huge horrendous stories. They're things that are gonna, you know, happen in any business, and I think are worth, you know, the extra income that it brings in from it. So it was some stuff like bringing an unapproved dog. In the dual lock, I've had one instance where the 2 groups ended up in an argument with each other. But that's probably the extent of the issues, really.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Alrighty. And so, as far as what you're doing at the moment, talk to us about your any sort of current projects you've got on the go and sort of what your plan is, you know, sort of moving forward.
Yeah, so we've got 2 in construction at the moment. One's a duplex and one's a single knockdown rebuild that's just starting. And we have just got our next one about to start, which is a duplex that should be getting underway in the near future. We should have like the documentation and stuff to get that underway in the next, hopefully, week or 2. So that'll be the next one that we get underway. And then we've got one more that's in council that's coming out. So that's kind of the current pipeline. And,
are these duplexes? Yeah. Are these duplexes on the Central Coast, which are obviously, you know, nice areas. Are they double story or single story dwellings?
They're all double story, the ones that I've spoken about, because you have to do the double story to get enough rooms on the block size. Villas do really well here as well, and you're kind of talking different numbers when you do villas and you go into a slightly bigger location where you've got a bigger block. So if you've got generally about 700 squares or close to it, you can get 2 nice villas on the block and still have like your 3 bedrooms and have them single level. The ones that we've got at the moment are double story on smaller blocks, so 560 and 600. So you kind of got to go to the double story to actually have a comfortable 3 bedrooms and give it a backyard and stuff. So
yeah, okay, awesome. Talk to me about how you sort of fund your projects. I know, obviously, you know, everyone that's in property deals knows that you need to, you know, venture out. You're not just getting your loans through the Big Four. There's money partners, private lending, you know, load off loans, all that sort of stuff. Do you want to talk to us about your funding strategy?
Yeah, look, we use low doc lending, good broker, we use commercial lending, and we use money partners, right? The combination of all of them to, you know, get the deal done depending on the strategy. So if it's a reno flip, you might fully fund it with money partners. Sometimes you might take a chunk of the mortgage if you can to keep some of the interest costs down. When you're doing developments, you're normally going into the commercial finance once you get into, especially into the construction stage. So you're looking at private and commercial lending options there generally. Sometimes you can try and push some low doc or resi lending on the site depending on how long your timeline is. But use, you know, all the combinations to get the deal done.
With those knockdown rebuilds, what sort of, I mean, you mentioned obviously you work off a 10%, you know, return on investment for your flips, but for like a knockdown rebuild, which is obviously, you know, it's a bit more riskier in the sense that it's you know, a longer project. You're not in and out within that sort of 6 months that you talked about. You know, it's a 18 month sort of thing. So what sort of return on investment are you looking at for those sort of projects?
You'd like to target the 20%, but it's sometimes that's not realistic. Like that's what you want in a development. So a duplex, high density, you know, you're really wanting your 20%. For a knockdown rebuild, I think if you've got clear evidence of the resales and that's sitting at 15% in a market that has strong fundamentals, that's normally what we look at. Otherwise, your numbers just aren't going to work. Like if you're expecting 20% and you've actually got realistic build costs and stuff, it can be hard to actually, you'll talk yourself out of deals. So,
yeah,
you know, go in conservatively, but also be realistic and don't expect the world, because remember, you are playing with a larger purchase price and the profit, you know, for a smaller percentage more is still a bigger dollar figure than when you're talking like a 500 grand reno. You're talking, let's just say a 1.5, you know, total project cost. So, you know, even 150s, you know, it's actually 10% profit, but we're normally probably targeting around the 250, 300 target for a knockdown rebuild.
Profit?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Are you...
The market can move, right? Especially the high-end market can be very fickle, right? So that's where you want to, you know, you're targeting good fundamentals in terms of that location. Like why are people buying?
Are you using like a good... Are you using like good data, like a good property analyst, to make sure that you're confident in what direction the market's going and stuff like that when you're doing those sorts of deals?
It's more boots on the ground, I would say, like actually being there, seeing the buyers, talking to the agents about who the buyers are and what they want. Because the thing in that market is you've got to get the product right. So something that I've been having conversations with people recently about, like there's, especially in this market, there's say 10 people that want the $1 million property. There's say 5 of them online, right? So there's strong buyer demand, less stock. When you're selling your, you know, $2 million house, there's 5 of them on the market at the moment and potentially 2 buyers looking for that product. So your ratios are different. So you've got to hit the nail on the head of what they want,
exactly.
and what they expect.
Otherwise,
it can change. Like, yeah, the last one that we've done, you know, you think you do all the right things. You know, the area felt really great. The you know, we've said, do we need a pool, like in terms of our target? And the feedback unanimously is don't need to do a pool. The buyers don't really want it. Like it's just a headache. If they won't not buy it because there's no pool, they'll put a pool in if they really want it, right?
Yep.
12 months later, pool's non-negotiable and we don't have a pool. So we've been a bit slower selling than some other properties. So, you know, and that's the rest of risk with property, right? And why you build in fat contingencies and profit expectations. So if everything goes wrong, you're kind of still walking away with something, well, you know, with a bit of profit and all your you know, lessons from that. But, you know, we'll still make a decent profit from that one. But it's just an interesting example of how the market can shift when you're talking longer time frames, right?
Yeah, for sure, 100%. I mean, 18 months, you know, things can certainly change in 18 months.
Yeah.
With those sorts of, so I was going to say, with like, say, I'm just going to compare the two strategies, like a reno flip versus like a knockdown rebuild for you. What sort of, you know, how much of your own cash are you putting into these deals versus, let's say, for example, you're using money partners and stuff like that for a flip. How much skin are you putting in the game for a deal like that? And then obviously
depends.
Versus, depends.
Yeah, it depends, you know, what the capacity is at the time of going into it, right? What our funds are tied up in, what else we've kind of got going on and what the opportunity is. They're generally funded residentially. Because it is a single house. So you're kind of getting decent loan amounts. So we're generally getting the 80% kind of loan on that to get into it. So then your cash contribution is just that 20% of the project, which is, you know, a lot less than, say, if you're doing a reno, especially if it's structural. You're generally not going to get funding against that structural renovation component unless you're getting a building contract for it. So, you know, it can be a cash effective strategy in that sense. But normally we'll get you know, investors or money partners to, you know, lend the deposit at fixed interest is what we generally do with our money partners, especially now having quite a good track record of, you know, projects and performances, a bit of a base behind us. So we generally just offer fixed returns for coming into that. So
yeah, cool. So just for clarification, so on your when you were talking about traditional bank lenders and 20% deposit. Were you saying that was for more your knockdown rebuilds? Is that how you finance?
Yeah, your low doc lenders and your third kind of tiers, not your big four primary ones, but not your commercial kind of private lenders either.
Yeah, okay. All right. So you basically, let's say you're buying something for, for $1 million, 1.2. So you're putting in a 20% deposit and then your low doc loan and then what about with the construction? Again,
it's about the 20% deposit again. So they're you're needing to fund that as cash. So now an interesting point, if you're going into it expecting to do that and your initial when you brought it, the lender knows they're probably not going to lend you 80% on the purchase. They'll lend you like commercial rates of like 65%, but they'll still lend you the overall same loan, which means generally you're just paying the deposit up front. You're going to then get almost 100% construction finance because they expect you to have, the certain dollar value over the project as your skin in the game. And that's achieved by reducing their land value to 60% or 65%. And then they adjust it when they get their construction valuation that they're happy with. But you're generally not going to have to chip in then 20% of your construction cost when you go to that, because they've factored in a bit of it. So, but otherwise, if the house is kind of habitable and you might be able to get the 80% loan on the actual property before you go into it. And then when you go into construction, you have to top up the shortfall.
Beautiful. Awesome. Cool. All right. I've got 2 more questions. So second last question. What was the point where you were able to go from full-time employee to full-time property person?
Well, I remember leaving my job was when I was pregnant with my son, actually, who's about to turn 6. But it's about the pipeline as well as, so the projects that you've got coming up, as well as then the base behind you. So I had a good reason at that time. So that was the point that I went pro. So we had a bit of a portfolio behind us. We had, projects upcoming that we were committed, like, time doing. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. So basically, you had obviously enough, obviously had deals in the pipeline, so you were going to obviously get, profits from those. But obviously, you would have had to have, a decent amount of money in the bank.
You're going to keep going.
Yeah, you've got to be able to survive. Essentially.
Yeah, that's right. Because if you've got this project coming up, you need to work out when that's actually going to come in. So,
100%. Yeah, cool, awesome. All right, last question. Same last question I asked everyone. What would you, what would be your advice to anyone sort of thinking about getting into, property deals? I mean, most people start with flipping and that sort of stuff because, quick, it's quick cash flow and that sort of stuff. So what would be your advice to anyone thinking of, making the leap of faith?
Look, get into it, but work out what strategy and what your current position needs, right? So, work out your capacity, work out your goals, and then what is going to get you there. So, flipping is a good way to get chunks. Renovating to hold and doing extra doors is a good way to build up income. What you go straight into is going to depend on your current financial position, or what your priority is, right? And your needs will change over time. And I think that's really important, and why we have quite a flowing journey going through different strategies is because what you need changes as you get other things behind you and your goals change and your experience changes, but also your strategies might change based on the area. I used to say to people, you can't necessarily make a strategy work in an area. You've got to either pick a strategy and work out what area it works in, or pick an area and work out what strategy works in the area. Because otherwise you might find yourself putting like a round peg in a square hole. So you need to kind of match them. So a lot of times people are like, I want to flip and I want to do it in my backyard, and the numbers don't work there. So if flipping is what you need to find out where the disparity is, where it works. And it's much easier to find somewhere that has intrinsic disparity, meaning the area already has unrenovated sales selling at this figure, and renovated sales at this figure, and there's a margin in there to make it work. We spoke about the 33% kind of guide, you know, of what you're needing in terms of that disparity. It's much easier to get a project in an area where the natural margin is close to there. Otherwise, you're fighting an uphill battle and solely relying on buying something under market value and trying to rip someone off to make a profit, right? In terms of, yeah, do you understand what I mean? Like if they can go, it's hard to, yeah.
I hear what
so
you're saying.
if you find an area where it works naturally, it's less of a fight, it's less of an uphill battle, but you'll find deals anywhere. But there's another old saying that says, like, in the development space, you know, almost every block could be developed, but only like 10% should be developed. And I think you notice that in your numbers of looking at the duplexes and stuff, and you're like, they just don't make sense. Like, why are people doing them? Because almost every block can have a development of some kind on it. Doesn't mean it's profitable. Yeah,
for sure. Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for coming on. It's been really great, you know, having a chat to someone who's doing multiple strategies. Yeah, obviously you're someone who's been successful and you know, doing this for a long time. You've obviously you know, coached other people, different strategies and that as well. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Yeah, it's been great listening to your story.
Thanks for having me.
No worries.
Good night, everyone. Bye.